Our guest today on the road to success with the LadyMayowa podcast is Adam Roosevelt, a decorated U.S. Army veteran, a politician, public speaker, media consultant, security expert, entrepreneur, and one who has served with the private office of the Al Qasimi royal family in Sharjah in the United Arab Emirates. Our conversation is rich as he talks to me about his idea, his principles of success, his journey here in the UAE, what to do and not to do when you do meet the royal family and the Emiratis, understanding the kind of value that you can offer here in the United Arab Emirates. The conversation is one you definitely don't want to miss. My guest today is Adam Roosevelt, and I'll allow him share all the juicy details about his person. But the conversation is about understanding the value system that gets us into the inner circle, as I like to say, understanding the locals. You have history in this country already, but before we get into that history, I want to understand, how did you come to be in Dubai?
Well, first, it's a pleasure to be with you, as I will first start by saying, we have done so much together. So let's break the ice and talk about how we got to Dubai. I was in Washington, D.C., and after running politics, being involved in media, served 10 years in the U.S. military, I said, I want to do something a little more dynamic. I want to go to Dubai. As I told you, I didn't have a real plan. I had a vision. So they say the first thing you do is visualize where you want to go. I did that. I was asked by my godparents to come to Dubai. I actually packed up everything. I put all of my items in storage. I said, I'm going to come over to Dubai. I flew over. I started getting involved in the UK American community. And then my godparents asked their friend who was Emirati. There was a group called the Corporate Group led by the Alawati family. And they're very successful. Father was, working in commodity trading. The family, the sons, the daughters, they built a very nice sized organization doing all different types of things. And I came on as a executive director. Now, I was still a CEO, but I wanted to integrate into the Emirati program, understand the culture. I did that for 8 months. I participated in Expo. I participated in client engagement. I learned everything from the licensing, the development, the trade, logistics, all these different things that I would not have been given the opportunity to know. I went through my internship, and one day I was asked to speak. I had already been doing work with TV stations like Sky News Arabia. People knew me there. And they asked me to speak at one of the private office events. It was called the Future Innovation Summit. And that summit was a semi-governmental summit that was sponsored by a member of the royal family from Sharjah, operating in Dubai. And I spoke on artificial intelligence and weaponization. That speech gave air to my connection with the group. Shortly thereafter, they asked me to come down to Sharjah. I spoke with them. They said, we're interested in potentially collaborating with you, maybe coming on as a member of our team. Within maybe a month or two later, I was on the board of that private office. And then I started integrating into those affairs. So that's a very short summary of how I went through the process, starting from internship, some family ties, and then putting a lot of time and energy into honing my craft, learning the system, and then speaking at a function, which then propelled me into an opportunity to transition into this private office group.
That's amazing. And I know that you do have, before you moved here, you had accomplished a lot already. But take me back to that season where you got the invitation. Come and join us in Sharjah. Come into the inner circle.
Yeah.
Were you awed in any way? Did you have any? Because one thing people struggle with is, some people struggle with imposter syndrome. Some people struggle with, oh my God, can I really do this?
Yeah.
People struggle with different fears of different sorts. But take me to that moment. Did you feel like you were ready? Were you anxious? Did you just get lost in that, oh my God, this is really happening? Tell me about that.
Well, I think every story has a challenge that we often don't like to highlight. We like to highlight the success story, and then we give some principles and values of what you should do. And reality was, we encountered a lot of challenges leading up to that particular moment. And that was cultural barrier. There was also status barrier. There was also brand not being known by the group. So once we got to the stage, we maximized. So we did encounter our challenges based on culture, based on, there was not communication. There was some issues coordinating the flights. So many things happened. But in that moment of opportunity, I said, this is where I have to prove who I am, to showcase the person that I am, the capability that I will bring to the Emirates, and the ability to say, no matter what issues we experience during that process, I will still show up and show you 100% of what I'm capable of doing. And in that engagement, I was able to convert that back issue into a opportunity of success.
It's always about taking the opportunities. Opportunities don't write letters, I would say.
Yes.
And before we started recording, I told you about how the foreigners, so to speak, in this country, over 80%. But we do have hosts, they're there. But very few get into the inner circle. And the way I see it is, it's great to be here. Being here already brings you value if you know what you're doing. And then how much more the opportunity you get when you get to meet the locals, to work with the locals, to give value to the locals, because giving value means you also get value in return. But very few get in there. What do you think would be the reason? Of course, this is like, there's a hierarchy in place, right? Not everybody has access to the big tops.
Yes.
But what else? Is it that people don't understand the value to offer? Or is it cultural? Is it fear? How would you explain that bit, why we have just very few? And after that, I'll get into what gave you access,
Sure.
How did you do it?
Sure. Well, I think many of us would say at this point, the simple answer often is probably the real answer: patience. There was a lot of patience required for me to control my ego. Coming from my country, who I am and who I was, I have a lot of influence. I know that. But as I step into another country, that influence, it wades. People don't really know who you are. So you are starting from ground zero.
Absolutely.
And we can't bring our identity sometimes into a new space. We have to be willing to learn, listen, have patience, and then we have to earn our title in that country. So in that regard, my advice to folks would be the patience aspect, the cultural understanding, and then there will be times where you can prove yourself. As you mentioned, the imposter syndrome, absolutely. You will have a dynamic where you're fighting who you are to try to understand who they are. And there's such a conversation about money and fame and power in the Emirates that sometimes that clouds the vision, and that makes you pretend to be someone you are not. And that often is a problem.
Absolutely.
So you have to control that. You have to control that fantasy in your mind and focus on small tasks to accomplish the bigger vision. And that, I think, is the problem. People are pretending. And there is a patience aspect here. There is a let me understand the cultural aspect. And then it will take some time. You may not be able to participate in the first 50 meetings. You may not be able to participate in the events. Maybe you're not on the stage the first year. You may have to just sit back in a position where you're showcasing what you can bring to the table. And that is all driven by patience and cultural understanding.
I can see myself in your story when you talk about don't bring a chip on your shoulder here. Everybody knows this story. Fantastic TV career back home in Nigeria, got into a really good place where people are like, are you kidding me? You're about to leave all of this and go to Dubai and start from scratch where nobody knows you. Yeah. And one thing I also tell people, just like as you say, is be humble and be willing to learn from scratch. Be willing to say, here I am nobody and I want to learn. I want to integrate. I want to give value. And I think that's an important lesson people need to learn. Yes, you were all that in your country. And that's not to say that you get here and you just become rag or something, right? It's not like you lose your self-worth or self-esteem. I think the important thing is to have a heart to learn and a heart to be humble, a heart to say, here is ground zero. Nobody knows my daddy, like they say in Nigeria. Nobody knows your father, right? I'm here. I want to serve. I want to learn and I want to grow all over again. That's amazing. So fun question. I meet an Emirati today. I already know I have value to offer. And I know that this value can serve an Emirati, can serve the inner circle, can serve the locals. But of course, there's so many bridges to cross culturally. So if I meet an Emirati today, what kind of conversation should I be having? What should I be doing or not be doing?
Sure. Well, first, it depends on the Emirati. So you have the royal family, and that's a certain type of protocol that you have to be knowledgeable when you engage. And there's tiers in the royal family. So you have tier 1 through what we call tier 5. Tier 1 would be the ruler of Dubai, son, daughter, okay? And then you have cousins and so forth. So there's a certain protocol to engage, okay? Now, if you have what they call pillar families, like Shamsi and Luta, those are also families that are very integrated into the United Arab Emirates. They're very strong in their industries, and there are ways to provide a service. Now, the hard part that entrepreneurs have to understand is they've been here running this for a long time now. They have outsourced, they have insourced, they have already paid, they've outsourced to maybe cheap labor. So the question is, how do you provide a service that is cost effective, that is also hitting one of the main pain points? And that is the first two things that you have to understand. Because whether they're in need of marketing, whether they have international expansion, you have to do the research. Abu Dhabi Ports, for example, is doing international expansion, merger acquisitions all over the world. The question would be, what can you do for them that they're not already doing for themselves? And it has to be pitched in a way where it aligns with the strategic vision of Abu Dhabi, aligns with the strategic vision of the organization, and then you have to meet with the stakeholders and you have to build that trust element, which does take some form of time. Now, you can strategize in terms of how you want to engage the market. You can look for local partner who has a name. That helps propel you into the market. In some cases, that may cost money. You have to know and be ready to hear that and understand that it may cost you some dollars to engage this market. So there's multiple strategies, often none of which are free. So you have to come with something at least to offer in the table, whether that is power, influence, or money. And without those things, I think it becomes a challenge, but you can still be creative in your solutions in terms of engaging the Emirati community. But I came with family. I came with some form of service that could serve the organization. But before they heard me, I had to have a brand. And that opportunity was shaped on the stage where a lot of people could hear me, they could see me, and that was where the opportunity was shaped.
I like that you mentioned branding, because I talk on branding. I teach personal branding, and I've seen the results of investing in a personal brand. Yeah. Now you come to the UAE. The UAE is big on reputation and image. I feel like there's something funny I say, that other nations should probably hire the UAE to manage their image, because the UAE has done such a fantastic job of image management. And so you trickle down to persons, right? If this country is doing such a fantastic job with its branding as a nation and that image, how can you as an individual not be looking at doing that as well? So tell me about personal branding. If you're in a country like the UAE, you want access to the locals and you want to do business with them, you want to be friends, whatever you want to do with them. How important is personal branding?
Let me tell you, you have just opened up the most exciting part of the conversation, because we're both media, professionals. So we get we understand the value of branding, and I would say you have a number of ways to brand. Right now, social media is one way to brand. You have to be careful because the UAE requires you, if you want to influence, you have to be registered in these type of license activities and so forth. So you have to be knowledgeable in regulatory. In terms of what you can still do is you can still go on stage. You can still get booked. You can still do TV, potentially, if you have something that is of value to the producers and so forth. So I look at TV, radio, podcasts, like what we're doing right now. And then you're creating a campaign. It's not a one-time show up and that's it. It is, in the next 30 days, what is the theme of who my brand is? Whether it's I want to be the COP28 influencer, whether I want to be the COP28 marketing firm, you have a 30-day plan. Start small. Okay, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm going to do a quote on Monday. On Wednesday, I'm doing an engagement with, the folks in the studio. On Friday, I'm doing this. But you have to commit that time to enhance your brand, and people will start to follow and engage that content. And I think that provides a level of bona fides respect, so that if someone like the royal family or a pillar family sees that, they come across that, you will start to see certain things happening on your page. But you have to empower yourself, okay, by taking that action. And then you have to leverage that content to accomplish an objective, whether that be to get a job, whether that be to partner with an organization, or whether that be to make money. So there's a system behind that, and you have to put a system in place to be effective with the brand strategy.
Absolutely. It's so important. And I find in my journey that a lot of people think that, oh, I'm not ready for personal branding, right? They think they have to get to a certain level. I don't know what they're looking for, maybe a certain amount in their bank account to say, okay, now I'm ready for personal branding. How early should one start personal branding?
That is another great question. I mean, at this point, I think personal branding has started from the time you open your Facebook account to 100%. The time you went to Twitter, because the employers were already looking at your account when you applied for their job. So you already have personal branding. If you have an unprofessional photo or the writing style in the summary is incorrect, that's a version of personal branding on a digital platform. So as early as 16, 17, maybe even before that, we have influencers who are already doing YouTube, at 11. And we've seen the numbers that they're making millions and millions of dollars. So branding starts as early as when you can actually manipulate an actual digital asset, whether it be a phone, a computer, or anything that can be the representation of who you are physically and digitally. So as early as possible. But for the career professionals, as early as when you can actually work based on the jurisdictional laws.
Absolutely. Most of them find it difficult navigating what the office says and what I want to do. But I think people can still navigate it if they are committed to do it and if they see the value. But anyway, enough of personal branding. What should I not be doing with a local?
Very, very good question.
I'll tell you one funny thing I heard, because you know that I MC events like Jitech, high end. And I heard that if you're sitting on stage, you shouldn't let the sole of your shoes show, like underneath your shoes. That's like disrespectful or something. I heard it's like a no-no, but you tell me.
Well, there's probably going to be some guidebook that someone publishes somewhere that states that this is not the way to perform, or this is a protocol. And surely those protocols do exist. I can assure you they do. I particularly have not had the opportunity to be told that I'm doing the wrong thing because my leg is crossed. The presidents cross their legs, prime ministers cross their legs, people in power and influence cross their legs. This is an international environment. We have to also remember that we are coming from our countries. We must be respectful. We must understand that. But that's a very small detail, personally. I would say things that you want to watch out for are religious conversations. You want to be careful, especially in the professional space. This is a Muslim country, and then that could cause tension. That's one thing. The next thing is family values. Yeah. It's so important, family values. In fact, as I got closer to the group I was working with, the Emirati, it was all about family. And this family office or private office, it's all family, and they can see what your values are if you're talking about your wife, your children. So remember that you're also representing yourself when you're speaking to professionals, and they want to know about family. Can I trust this person? But then there's also the handshakes. There's also the hijab. There's a lot of different things that you have to be cognizant of. The clothing that you wear, that's important. If you're a female, if you're a male, you want to be cognizant of the UAE laws. That's important. So those are the small things, the attire, the type of acumen of the culture. You want to do some research, but just be yourself, and don't try to overdo it, because then you look awkward in this situation, and then people start to think something must be up with this person.
Is that guy okay?
Is he okay? We're okay. They do actually wear the condor, and they often do wear a pair of jeans. So, when they travel to different countries, they are wearing the local attire. Sheikh Mohammed, he's been dressed down in a nice shirt. So you can see that even he, the ruler, has donned the Western, attire in the appropriate setting. So that you can see international integration, but just come prepared, but not overly overthinking. And that will obviously drive at least the first initial icebreaker.
Absolutely. I follow the Sheikh himself. I follow Fazer as well. And I've seen them on holiday in the UK, really blending in, right? Of course, you can never really blend in if you're if you're the ruler of Dubai or the crown prince. let's talk about how advanced, how the growth of the UAE. And when we talk about the UAE and its growth, we talk about the growth of the leaders, the mindset of the leaders, and their approach to life. And I appreciate how open-minded they are. I think in the entire Arab nation, in the Middle East, the UAE sticks out beautifully for tolerance. In my journey as a storyteller, you find a lot of people have misconceptions about the Middle East and UAE in particular. You find people who are still afraid, like, oh my God, I'm like, what are you talking about? We are as free as a bird here. Like, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'm not eager to go back home. I love it here. I love how international it is, how you can be here and be engaging globally, right? And I think that sometimes when you're in a certain country, there's a filter that comes over you that is not good for business sometimes, right? But when you're here, it's very open and the world is very accepting and very respectful of the UAE and Dubai and its accomplishments and its growth. And so if you're doing business from Dubai, that sort of rubs off on you as well. I won't go into the details of if you're doing business from some other country and how some people there's a red flag already just because you are in that country. But let's talk about that open-mindedness, right? You would see the ruler of Dubai go to the UK and, be dressed down, be Western in his attire. It shows how open-minded to a degree that they are, but you're an insider. Has anything ever really surprised you? Perhaps you had any misconception privately, right? Maybe you told no one, it was just inside you. And then something happened one day and you're like, wow, do you have any stories like that?
I do. I will say that I come from a certain frame of thought because of where I'm from. I'm American, so I'm Western. I'm military, so I have...
As Western as they can be.
As Western as it can be. My first year, I wore, cowboy boots, so because I'm from the West, I'm from a military. So you imagine that I had already been conditioned to be the icon of the West. So that means my principles, values, perceptions have already been preconditioned in a very rigid environment, especially military. I went to war in Afghanistan. So that's a difficult, trajectory if you're thinking about full immersion, what we would call it in a different culture. So from that perspective, the stories that would have surprised me the most is just realizing that what I thought I knew, I did not know. So entering into the private office, working alongside the Emirati, also the Russians and the Ukrainians in the middle of a war. So imagine all these preconceptions that we've developed because of the news channels and these things. I've now had to be fully immersed in the culture, working alongside not Westerners, but Easterners and their way of doing business. So Belarusians, Russians, all the things that we're talking about geopolitically have influenced us. But in that business environment, they're working toward one objective. And that objective is to serve the purpose of the sponsor, execute the mission at hand, which is to develop clients and so forth. And you've got all that immersion of culture differences, even the food you're eating, everything is fully immersed. So that is a very basic way of just going through the process of reconditioning my mental framework to align with the actual culture of the UAE. And then you got to break out into personal sessions and people are actually open to hearing your voice and what you have to say. And they're actually more interested in hearing about the West and talking about the conversations they generally wouldn't talk about in public. So that is more surprising than you would assume because you came in preconditioned. So absolutely. As you get further along and you engage these type of groups, there are layers or walls that begin to come down, and then you find one truth, and that is we are humans. And we all share the same desires. We may have different thoughts and beliefs, but at the end of the day, we're human. We drink water, they drink water. We go for horseback riding, they go for horseback riding. We care about family, they care about family. So you begin to see there's a synchronization between humans, and it's not so different as you would have believed, but there are some differences that make them who they are, Emirati, absolutely, and who we are coming from our country.
So people talk about American privilege here. I don't know if you've heard it, but some people would say, let's say if you're an American here, you're made, like it's easier for you, everything is smooth just because American.
Yes.
Tell me about that. Have you heard it? And what would you say to something like that?
I have actually heard that, and I have not experienced that American privilege that everybody has highlighted. Because if you think about the UAE and the birth of the free zone, who created the free zone? It was the UK and UAE working together for British common law, UK common law. And that's the framework that built this whole place. And when I talk about DIFC or ADGM, it's all English common law. And again, that was the historical connection between the UK and the United Arab Emirates. And then you have, the India history and the connection. So all these pillars of connection, America is somewhere in there. But in terms of being the main influencer, I don't exactly see that. I think our passport is respected, but I also think there are some geopolitical issues that have not yet to be addressed. Business will continue, but the East has a coalition, and that coalition is connected by geography, by cultural values, and the West is a different system. So the reality is America is very strong. The passport is very strong. Our identity is very respected, but you will have to work for what you want in the Emirates, no matter what nationality you are. But you do have a higher demand price because of where you're coming from. And that is the nature of the conversation. But equality must be protected. Okay. So we never want to say one nationality is higher than the other. Yeah. But if we looked at the data, we would have to see what the truth is, and we'll leave that to the data.
I love that you talked about, you created that link between an individual here and the nation that they come from and the history of that nation with this nation. Because I'm Nigerian, and for the past couple of months and years, it's been a tricky relationship. Yeah. So would you agree with me that the relationship between my nation, I could be anyone now, right? Hypothetically speaking, that the relationship between your nation, where you come from, and the nation of the UAE is important for you as a person in this place. Would you agree with that?
That is a multifaceted question. So let me answer a few. So if you come from India, you know that there's a large population of the Indian community that dominates certain sectors. Yeah. Okay. It is also well accepted that the Indian population knows their way around the UAE, and their price is the most competitive. So you come in with some gifts, association to a larger community, people trust that you can get it done. Those things are going to be inherent stereotypes. So we all have a certain stereotype that we must be acknowledging before we enter a country. Now, we don't want to highlight the negativity. We want to highlight the good points, which we will do. Now, if you're coming from Nigeria, there's a lot of trade relations, but there's some immigration conversations happening right now between the United Arab Emirates and Africa. And now there's an issue with our people being able to come over. I'm also Nigerian. Yeah, look at that. The surprise of the moment.
Wait, what?
51%. And, so I'm also from the diaspora, as just looking at me, but from the actual blood relation.
Pause right there. Put a peg right there. Yes. Which part? Does it tell you which part of Nigeria?
They have not actually drilled it down, but I can tell you that Nigeria, there's Bantu, there's a few other. I've done the whole, the testing. I think they have it. It's called 21andMe. And so we've done that, and we've uncovered that we have a blood tie to Nigeria. So in some of my work behind the scenes, I have been engaged in the African Union. I was in Ethiopia, for example. So I understand those plights and challenges. And I also am looking at how do you represent such diversity and be a champion for change, and at the same time be able to represent these issues and be a problem solver. So as our brand gets higher and we get into more things that can influence Emirate discussions, maybe we can solve some of the issues that have caused for this immigration challenge to effectively come to this point. We have to be able to represent ourselves politically, strategically, and from a business perspective. Although this is not the playing ground for politics, this is still the playing ground for people. So I think that there will be a time where agents of change have the ability to at least offer up solutions to bring our nations closer, to enhance trade. So that's one thing I'm extremely interested in. So I think that has to be resolved. But to my concluding point, mentioning the stereotypes of where you're coming from, the current geopolitical trends, you have to look at where you can leverage the benefit of that association. And there are communities here in the UAE that accommodate, more friendly conversations depending on where you're entering into the space. I love it.
So I have a question. A lot of people I find are afraid to talk about the UAE or talk about Dubai. You get people who just almost live in fear. They live here, but it's almost like they live in fear to talk about it, or talk about it online, talk about this, talk about that. It's almost like, don't mention the word. That is a word that must not be said. Else you might end up somewhere you weren't anticipating.
Right.
But you are a foreigner as well, right? You're not an Emirati, at least not by birth, maybe by association. But tell me about how to speak. Is this fear? Is it valid? Should it be? I don't think so, because I don't live in fear. But you tell me about it.
Well, let me give you an example. And let me start in the West. In the U.S. military, we were given certain protocols. So if you were engaging the press, there was a protocol to engage the press. And that wasn't because we didn't want you to speak. It was because maybe you are not fully informed or aware of what the reason is behind a decision. And at this level, you may be speaking and influencing the future of other people's thoughts and perceptions without fully being informed. There are public relations officers who have studied culture, who have studied geopolitics, and when they speak, they have the full knowledge, awareness, and briefing about the statements they're going to make. So in some cases, freedom of speech in certain jurisdictions is restricted and limited because there is a system of governance based on the government, what is being messaged. And then if you use your platform based on where you're coming from, you're using your perspective, and it may not be the Emirati perspective. So there has to be a delicacy in what you say, what you capture, what you record, and all these laws are going to be no different than if you go to another country. So we're in a jurisdiction where laws are important, and we have to be under the framework of the ruler of the United Arab Emirates, and each emirate has its policy. We have to be respectful. It's a part of being a good steward in another country. You have to respect the laws. If we go down to Russia or Ukraine, they have a law, they have a system. We must, as expats, respect that system. And now, in exchange for that, we get a lot of benefits that a lot of people don't receive. The tax benefit is important. The access to all these different opportunities, loans from Mashreq Bank, you know, if you meet the 3-month requirement, safety and security, education. So there is a balance of justice in the United Arab Emirates, but there has to be a system of governance to monitor and manage a good population of so many different diverse communities coming together. And again, you can take the training, the cultural training. If you so wish to speak as an influencer, you will go through a process to learn what is appropriate and what is not. And you are now in compliance and licensed and authorized. So there is a system that will allow you to have that voice, okay, if you want to reach larger people. But let's follow the rules of this host country and be respectful of those policies so we don't disrupt the ecosystem that is keeping all of us safe, connected, and protected.
You've just made an absolutely, if there's any way to, valid point. Because now, and I never thought about it that way, right? How we've got over 200 nationalities, so 200 different ways. And even sometimes in one country, there are like a million ways where people are raised. I'm Yoruba, for instance, is an Igbo man, is in a Hausa man. And all of us have different upbringings, different cultural backgrounds, different approach to life and doing things. And now picture 200 nationalities coming with their thoughts, their ideas, their own filters and biases to issues. And you live in this country. So I do agree with you that if everything was allowed like the Wild Wild West, then it would be absolute chaos. And being a media and communications expert, I understand the importance of messaging. So just imagine for one moment a UAE version where everyone was allowed to say anything, whichever way, whether they had the full context, the full picture, or the full story. That would be absolute chaos. And then we wouldn't no longer have a UAE, right? Then we'll all have to go back where we came from.
Well, yeah, I mean, we would actually stem a lot of conflict and confusion. You know, in fact, I think that there are, if you want to be political, there's a time and place to be political. There's a location for you to be political. Unfortunately, everyone just can't be political in this particular environment. And that's not to take rights away. There are a lot of rights here that you wouldn't receive in your country. There's a lot of rights that you get here that are very beneficial, but you just have to respect another person's country. I'm not a citizen. I am an expat coming to engage, learn, participate, expand my my family, my security resources, everything is happening for me, but it's not my country. And I have to remind myself that if I want to take part in someone else's country, I have to be a good steward and I have to be a good citizen in terms of being a resident and participating in their affairs. And that's just, I think, respect. At the end of the day, you're respecting that cultural foundation and the rules of law of that country.
That is important because we all come here to thrive here, to succeed, finding our own journeys, and everybody wants to succeed, whether you're in career, whether you're in business. And if you plan to live here even if you plan to stay here for one day, you need to appreciate the rules of the land, the laws of the land. And you find a lot of people fall into that trap because they didn't do their homework or they just feel like, I don't care, right? For instance, we all know of a particular viral story just a little while ago where an American citizen got into trouble and there was a whole noise about it globally. But at the end of the day, there's always that one question to be asked. Did you do your homework? And did you do what you were supposed to do as sort of like a law-abiding resident or tourist? So we shouldn't just say, I've got rights where I come from, and these are the rights where I come from, and so I'm going to enforce those rights anywhere I go. That's a good point. That's a really good point. But anyway, back to you being a Nigerian.
Yes.
That part. I think that you're from the Yoruba side. I look at you, I'm like, you don't look Igbo or Hausa to me. You look more like maybe a Rashidi or, I think a Rashidi, maybe a Rashidi. Should we find you a posh name, like a Femi? But Femis are heartbreakers.
Yeah. That might be one
Apologies
of those.
to all the heartbreakers. Apologies to all the Femis. But that's just on the fun side. So tell me about finding out you're about what, 50% Nigerian?
50%. Somewhere
Wow.
I think 50%.
That's a lot. So tell me about that. When you opened, I don't know how you found the information. Was it like an email or a letter with a red seal? Tell me how you found out and what you felt.
You know, actually, my dear friend, she's military, and she's the fun side of the version of us. And she thought it would be in my best interest for my birthday to learn where I'm from. So I said, okay, sure. So they get me this Ancestry.com, kit, and it has the saliva test. Anyway, we took that. Maybe a week or so later, we get the results back, and it has a long list of different, gene pools and associations. And Nigeria was one of the, associations. And then it had, a few other African nations, all integrated in the bloodline. And you had some European. It was weird because you could see the migration path of Africans and the connection. And at the end of the day, you realize you are either more associated to one group, but you're still a piece of many other ones. And that's an interesting discovery because it says what has happened in the time of being Africa from history on to today. And we're so connected. And I got so many viewpoints on that, but it was an interesting discovery. And now not just from the physical view of being African, but from the knowledge point of who I'm associated to, I have a duty also to represent and protect the interest of our people and the diaspora. And I think that that's the most important point of discovering who you are, is that you have a belonging to a people and you have a duty to protect those people and their voice. And that is an interesting discovery. Everybody will have their reason, but this was my reason and how I came to really appreciate this detail. So go to Ancestry.com, put our coupon code in.
You just never can tell. So after finding that out, have you woken up differently every morning? Maybe just when you hear Afrobeats now, it feels a bit more familiar. Or when you are invited to have you ever been to a Nigerian wedding? So maybe when you see Nigerian food, then it feels more, oh, wow, my ancestors or something, had that. Do you have a better appreciation now for Nigeria?
I do. And, I'll tell you, I think there's a large conversation about being African American and then being Nigerian born. And there's a system of upbringing that is so diverse and different. And that can itself create tension between, those our two groups. We are one people, but we have segmented groups, and our upbringings are changing our value systems, our beliefs. Some people don't feel connected. They're representing other things. They never go to Africa. They have no interest. So the first step is discovery. And then you begin to develop an interest and association to your people. And then you begin to respect certain aspects of your culture. And then you begin to grow a love for your people, a real love, because you will, as a woman, birth Nigerian children. I, as a male African, will have children who are Nigerian blood, no matter how they look. So they must understand to appreciate their culture, the people that they are a part of through association and bloodline. And I think if you follow those steps, you will come to really, truly appreciate and grow and develop a love for the people that you are associated with. So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Speaking of family and blood, you got married recently.
Yes,
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Did you find each other here?
We did, actually. So my wife, Shiva, she's interesting. She's from Iran. So our dynamic is already historical itself, given the differences of culture, the geopolitical challenges. But we met here in Dubai, and I knew at the first time I saw her that this is the girl for me. I knew.
Did you buy the ring like the next day?
I mean, like, I was love struck. She walked by, I said, wow, she's really beautiful. And I just tried to shake it off. And nonetheless, somebody made the mistake of sitting her next to me and talking. And then she started talking about psychology and education. And, I put my best version of myself together. But she was definitely the better version of me. And I realized that today. And she's definitely the fire in the house, keeping us all moving forward. So
exciting, love in Dubai. By the way, we are in Love in Dubai studio. Okay.
Yeah, it's difficult to find. I gotta tell you, I didn't think I'd find.
Tell me that story. Tell me about. I hear. So I came married, right?
Mm-hmm.
I already got married, and then I had my white wedding in Fujairah.
Mm-hmm.
But I came as a married woman, so I hear a lot of people talk about finding love in Dubai.
Yeah.
You give me your perspective, because some people think it's so fluffy. And when I say fluff, it's just like they just live for the image and the dates and the Hyatt restaurants and Dubai Mall, all the fancy stuff. But you tell me, because listen, I came already hooked and hitched.
Right. Well, I gotta say that there's some things I have learned in this process of being married to a different culture that is just completely different from everything I've ever known. And we can say family in the West, but in the United Arab Emirates and even in Africa and certain places, this family traditional value is you are born learning, observing, and building that. Some people live in the same house. Some people live in the same community. They pool their money together to buy resources. I mean, that is the real version of family commitment and traditional values. And you will be held accountable for that if you are from a system that says they are about family. But then when it comes time to be the full version of family commitment, you will learn, being married to an Eastern person, especially from the Muslim world, what that truly means. And I think that version of accountability will help you grow. It will be something that tests you as a person because you're from a different community. But for sure, you will be a better person. That I can say 100%. So I think in this process for me, the values, the principles are held higher than, say, the Western world in certain communities. So that's what I've come to understand. And I think that that's a beautiful observation in life to experience and then become a better person, more mature person, in fact. So that is to be determined, my full assessment of how I perform, but my wife won't let me fail. So I'm a little stuck.
That's exciting. And, it still is a testament to how exciting Dubai is, right? Different cultures, different nationalities, all living harmoniously together in this city. And now you from the West would meet a woman from Iran and live in a country that belongs to the Emiratis, but accepting of over 200 nationalities. I feel like your children will be like proper global citizens. Do you ever think about that and like the foundation that you're already laying for them and what it's like to raise a child if you plan to be here longer, raising a child, raising a family, building a family in a country like the UAE?
I have one daughter now and she is in America. So as I do family planning with my wife here, I think about what is going to be the benefit of my children growing up somewhere in the world. And the first thing I think about is safety and security. You know, we have all these different shows, Netflix, and they're talking about what's happening to children and all these different things. It doesn't happen in the United Arab Emirates. We're not having to be political about that statement, but that is just simply the truth. So I'm actually more terrified knowing that there are parts of the world where children are being hurt. They can go down to us. It won't happen. So for me, as I do family planning, I want them to be global citizens, but we're also thinking about them having an identity in the United Arab Emirates, because if it's my daughter that is born, she will definitely demand certain things from a man, family values. She will definitely have the car that she's asked for because he has no choice but to give it to her. And she's coming from Iran and she follows her mother. There's Maria, which is a commitment to the woman. And you, as a Muslim man, would have to commit to those things. So there's such a high system of accountability. And I trust that system now more, knowing what it's really about. So that's kind of where my thought process is. Safety, security, family values are really entrenched in the foundation in the UAE.
One more question about family before we go into business, because I know that, you left the Sheikh's office, now gone into full-blown business on your own. Do you think you'll be here forever?
It's a good question. I think my future is to influence the people that I am associated with. And I said there was a time and place for politics, and in my country, as being an American, there's a time and place for me to say, given all the challenges in the world, given the business conditions, given the challenges of the people in Africa, that I can take a position in my country and influence a global scene to bring peace, prosperity, and security to the global diaspora in one aspect, the people across the world. And having experienced the UAE and the Emirati, then I can represent that viewpoint in America, which I didn't have at the very beginning, and then build ties with nations to solve a lot of the problems that we have today. So I think there will be a time where I have to take myself and what I believe and put all of my energy into changing the world. So that's my future, but surely it will be hard to leave the UAE.
Tell me about it.
Have to go back onto the field of streets.
Tell me
deal
about
with the
it.
world, but yes.
Tell me about transitioning from, working fully in the private office to being on your own, doing business. What is it a transition? Did you feel it? It was like, oh my God, can I go back or let me stay? Or why did you even leave? That's another thing. Someone would think, he left? Yeah. Why did you leave?
Well, everything has a time. And even in the military, I gave my time to service 10 years, and I was there to propel the mission. But I also have a mission. And my mission is to do a lot more with the things that I've invested into. And I like to have that ability to chart my path with the knowledge that I have to shape a future that I believe in. And that's the reason why I transitioned. Surely it is a different game now, because when you're with the royal family or private office, you're kind of given this status that comes with that association. But I think it also shows you in terms of courage and bravery that even if you don't have the status, you should still be able to chart your path in life, because we're not all born on that side of the aisle. And I think for the people who will be viewing this, that we're all coming from different parts of the social class. We have to have hope. And if we're given a challenge, we have to be able to surmount that challenge. And if we're given an opportunity to be somebody and we encounter conflict, then we have to be able to grow and win and get back to that stage. So this is life's journey. So whether you are wearing the golden, armor, and one day you're wearing the cloth armor, you still have to be able to get up every day, be a voice, and do things you believe in to chart your path. You only get one life. And that's
I can literally see you in America now vying for office. It's like, ooh, come on now. You would be I imagine you giving your version of the famous I Have a Dream speech.
Yeah.
You'd be so powerful. My God.
You know what they say, inshallah.
Listen, just remember
Inshallah.
when you get back, okay? Yes. I do comms. I do.
We do comms. So then
No, but then you do comms. Now you'd get an expert. Perhaps I have my own global TV. So we'll have you back on the show.
There's
and
a collaboration
talk about,
somewhere.
Say, hey, today we have the President of the United States of America, Adam Roosevelt.
Yeah, they say you gotta be at least 6 foot. So let's see if we get a few more inches in the shoe.
Oh
And you know,
my
Obama
goodness.
actually, they say he was wearing some shoes that gave him a few more inches in height.
Okay.
Yeah.
We would need a lot
Yeah,
more
yeah,
for
we need a
you
couple-
really stack it up.
Couple inches, yeah. Get me taller at least.
Oh my good Lord.
Yeah.
But it's exciting. Let's talk about, I mean, ultimately our conversation, I love how we've progressed. We've talked about different things. And this conversation is titled Building a Value System for a reason. And I see how for every transition, for every phase, in every community where you found yourself, or every role, it's just about value. That I think is a common denominator. Someone will listen to this and be like, this guy's been everywhere, right? And you're not even done yet. I don't even think you're halfway there. You're still, still a long journey ahead of you. But I see how value is the common denominator for everything that you do and every place that you find yourself. When you think about value, what are your thoughts about it? And how would you maybe encourage and advise people watching now to take their value and take it everywhere, right? Some people feel stuck. It's like, oh, I'm an engineer, or I'm a nurse, or I'm a banker, and they just get stuck in that one place. But you just seem to shed off skin every time, and then as a new person emerged. Tell me about that.
Well, I think it is the person itself and the driver of why you're doing what you're doing. And that driver obviously can't simply be associated to material. It has to be something that is so powerful that even in the lowest rung of society, if you were at the top and placed at the lowest part, it would need to be the fire that carried you forward. So for me, it was patriotism first, then it was love of God, and then it was love of family, in that order, because I was developing as a professional and as a person. And I saw, serve the country, I'm willing to die for it because I see that the future would be better. That was my purpose. So a nurse has a purpose as well, to save as many lives as you can. If your job is where you have to interact with only 50 patients a day, that's your capacity. But what if you could do more? What if you could plot a chart where you could oversee the hospital and then use some of those decisions to invest in creating new hospitals? And now that 50, that goal becomes 100, and it becomes 200. And before you know it, your life's work has impacted millions of people or hundreds of thousands of people. But you just have to chart out that path. And even if you use a vision board, which some people do, they just print off where they want to go. Whether you want to be in the White House, or whether you want a Ferrari, whether you want the watch, whether you want to save 1,000 lives in Uganda, print off a vision board, put it in your house, look at it every day, and then visualize that, see yourself in that actual reality. And that way you can actually associate yourself to that goal. And I think that's one gift that will help propel you toward that, and that makes you more resilient.
When you think about success, what do you think about?
Oof. When I think about success, I think that real success is being able to manage your family and make sure that you protect them and make sure that the value systems that you have cultivated are creating good stewards of communities. That's the very first thing I would say. And I mentioned family values in the UAE. So that's the version of success today. It's not corporate anymore, because corporate is just, you can get sick one day and they replace you, and then they're on to the next thing. But what keeps you really going is the family. Your legacy is your children. And if you can be successful in that, and it will not be easy, then that way I can say there's a real metric of measurement of success, and that is within your family, your children, your estate. And that is the only real metric that I can see today as a version of success. You
have just upturned success on its head by the definition of many people. You mentioned two things that stick out to me. You mentioned corporate, you mentioned family values, and you also mentioned, attached to family, the UAE as well. And now my brain is literally churning, because for the longest time and for many years, success was always attached to corporate, right? Become XYZ, whatever you want to become in the workspace, get to the top of that chain, make all the money, build all the companies. For a long time, that was what success looked like. And of course, get the car, get all the status, get all the travel, whatever. But now you come in to say family, and it's not just when you say family, it's how you say family. And using almost the UAE template, I would say, how it was really about family. for the UAE as well. It wasn't just, we just want to do this. It was, how can we make our family better? How can we make our family more successful? And even till date, in all they do, family is protected, family is looked out for. That is exciting. I think there's a lot that we can learn from that. Do you ever see a time when globally, or it becomes a popular template for success, family rather than corporate?
Well, I do. In fact, I think those of which who have reached the 1% have mastered that, because if you think about the most successful families, JP Morgan Chase, for example, that's a family that's very dominant. They took the lessons that they learned and they applied them to different generations, and then they enhanced their portfolios and they carried that each generation. And that's family office. Family office, sovereign wealth, all that is family managed. The Emirates, Maktoum. And you got in the Abu Dhabi, you've got the family that runs Abu Dhabi under His Highness Mohammed bin Zayed. So if you think about that family system and then pooling the Emirates, the United Arab Emirates, those are families that have come, tribes that have come together to create one coalition of families to then represent a GDP, to represent an industry, to represent a voice, to represent a value system. And that is what is shielding them from the rest of the world's issues. They still experience them, but they're pooling their resources together to take on global challenges. And that is really the pinnacle of what you would call a family of families, sharing the same values, working toward one purpose, to change the world. And they've been able to do that. And they are the only destination in the world that keeps security in one status, and that is a status that will never change. It is the peace and security of a country. And that is built by family values, protected by family values. So that's a perfect model example that other countries could take and use. Surely that's a little different in the West, but again, there are models of example that could be used to empower and better those societies.
Absolutely. All right, Adam, tell my viewers what they should learn about success and encourage them on their road to success, because ultimately it's a journey, right? Whatever angle of success you're looking at, maybe it's providing for your family, protecting your family, trying to find better opportunities for your family. Ultimately, it's all a journey, and they're all on their journeys. We're all on our journeys. What would you tell them as they are on the road to success?
Sure. I would say this. Leadership is important because everyone wants to be a leader. But if you break down leadership based on what I will share, L stands for loyalty. Then you have D as for duty. Okay. You have respect, selfless service. You have honesty. You have integrity. You have personal courage. This is an acronym for leadership. And then when you add in resiliency, you become resilient over time. But there must be principles that you follow. And those principles have been my principles. Those are the United States military principles. And that has been my guiding platform going forward to guide me as a leader with those values. And now I've coupled them with family values to become a full, well-rounded person. And again, no one is perfect, but you must strive to be, I think, a model example for the people that you represent and the people that are in your coalition, all for the betterment of your family, who will then contribute to changing the world.
Amazing. Adam, it's been a real pleasure.
My pleasure.
Speaking with you. We've talked about everything, or maybe not everything, but a lot of things.
Yes.
And I appreciate your time, your insight, and just you gracing us on the Road to Success podcast.
It's my pleasure.
Chop knuckle.
It's real my pleasure.
So no more handshakes for you, okay? It's now it's chop knuckle.
I'm cool with that.